I'm always advising consumers that when they buy goods or services to use your credit card. The reason for this is that when you do so, you are afforded a significant protection under what's known as Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act 1974. You've probably heard of this as a Section 75 claim. Now, to make a Section 75 claim, 5 elements must be present. The first element is that the goods or services must have a value of between £100 and 1 penny and £30,000. So anything within that price bracket is potentially covered, but if it's less than that or more than 30,000, you won't be covered by Section 75. It's also worth noting that you don't have to pay the full amount with your credit card. So let's say you pay for a car. The car cost you £10,000 and you pay the £500 deposit on your credit card and something goes wrong, meaning that you're going to make a Section 75 claim, your card provider will cover you for the whole £10,000 in that scenario. The second element is that you must complain to the trader first. So that means you must complain to the company or the entity or the person that you are complaining about. So if you bought a car, you have a complaint, you go back to the car dealership or the garage that sold you the car. If it was something to do with goods you bought from a retailer, you go back to the retailer first. But the important element is you must do that before you make the Section 75 claim. Because the first question you'll be asked by your card provider is, what has the trader said? Have they come back and given you a response to your complaint? Have you given them enough time? If you say, I haven't gone to them first, they will immediately reject your claim. But it is worth noting that the Consumer Credit Act does say, under Section 75, that if the trader's gone bust, if they're failing to respond to you or you can't reach them because they've perhaps moved or not given you their address in the first place, then in those circumstances, you can go direct to the card provider. The third element is that you have paid the trader direct. And this is an element that catches many consumers out because often people say, well, I did pay them, therefore it was direct. And that's not always the case. Let me give an example. If you walk into a shop, you scan your card or you put it into the machine, put your PIN in, you're paying direct. If you pay over the phone with your card, you're paying direct. But if you pay online via a payment platform such as PayPal, you're not paying direct. That's because you're paying PayPal, it takes your money, and PayPal then in a separate transaction pays the trader. So there's no direct payment. So when you pay via PayPal and other platforms like this, Section 75 is not available to you as a protection. But note this, if you pay via Apple Pay, it's slightly different. And the reason for this is that Apple Pay simply pushes your payment on. It doesn't take your money and then in a separate transaction pay the trader. It just pushes it through its own system. So you are, in those circumstances, still paying direct. The fourth element is that the main card holder, that's the card holder that has the contract with the provider, must be the person who has made the contract with the trader. So lots of people have additional card holders, perhaps a wife or a husband or perhaps a child. If one of those additional card holders makes a payment on their credit card, they then cannot make a Section 75 claim. And the reason for that is they do not have a direct contract between themselves and the card provider. So Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act in those circumstances does not engage. There are some exceptions. I'll give an example of one. Let's say the additional card holder was paying for a joint gym membership. Now in those circumstances, that gym membership benefited the main card holder as well as benefiting the additional card holder. So the main card holder can say, well, the credit card account was used for my benefit or my part benefit, therefore it does still apply. I have heard many times where those claims have been upheld, but on most other occasions when it's not something like that, this would be a bar to a Section 75 claim if it was the additional card holder that made the purchase. The fifth and last element is the most common excuse for a card provider to reject a Section 75 claim. And it is that there must be either a breach of contract by the trader or there must be a misrepresentation. Let's take them in turn. The breach of contract. Let me give an example. If you bought goods and online it said that the goods were going to be red and when they turned up they were blue, there's clearly a breach of contract because the goods were not as described. And the Consumer Rights Act, which is the main law that covers consumer purchases, says that goods must clearly be as described. So if they're not, there's a breach of contract. If there's any other breach of contract, anything that the trader promised or should have done and they have failed to do, then you have a breach of contract. A misrepresentation is closely aligned but slightly different because here we're saying you were misled into a contract. So the contract should not have been there in the first place. So if you feel that someone has misled you and you relied on that misrepresentation to enter into a contract, perhaps it's to buy goods or to enter into a service, then in those circumstances, you can make a Section 75 claim by saying either I have been subject of a breach of contract or there has been a misrepresentation. If you satisfy all 5 elements of a Section 75 claim and the trader has failed to offer up a reasonable remedy under the Consumer Rights Act or any other consumer laws, then you are at the stage where you can make a Section 75 claim. Most providers have a process online for you to do so, but you should look at your own card provider's website or telephone them and ask them what their process is for making a Section 75 claim. I always tell consumers, the first time you make your claim, it is highly likely they will say no. Not sure why, but it happens. And I can tell you that from a huge amount of experience over a number of years of hearing consumers telling me so. I always say this, do not take no for an answer. If you are certain that you do meet those 5 core elements of a claim, go back again and say, I'm not accepting that. I do have a valid claim. Many people tell me when they do that the claim is then accepted. If it's not accepted, your next port of call is to go to the Financial Ombudsman Service. That's the ombudsman that deals with these claims if your card provider says no. It's a free service. It sometimes takes a long time for you to get an outcome, but if you have truly met the 5 essential ingredients for a Section 75 claim, as I've spelt them out, that's a claim that should be successful.